Okay, let's turn our attention to the international newspapers once again. Aaron Ogunki joins us for that. Aaron, this time we're going to start with Nigeria, which today is marking 60 years of independence.
That's right, Eve. Unsurprisingly, almost all of the Nigerian papers are talking about it. But what surprised me is that it's not at all a positive. There's not at all a positive view on the country's Independence Day. Now, it looks like they're using this really as kind of a reckoning, a day to reflect on where Nigeria has been and where it's going. I'll start with The Guardian Nigeria, which says after 60 years, Nigeria is still facing incessant gridlock and the elusive El Dorado. The author of this piece saying the country is still shipwrecked, I quote, in the island of doom and gloom, still marred by corruption, poverty, arrested development, and crumbling, if not non-existent, infrastructure. Now, the paper does blame much of the country's problems on poor leadership, but also goes on, I think, to blame neoliberal economic policies for the past 60 years, which he describes as a ploy to frustrate African development. And he suggests looking to countries like Brazil, India, Russia, and China as models not only politically but economically for where Nigeria can go in the future. The paper, The Punch, I think, takes a much harsher swipe at Nigeria and Nigerians specifically, saying this is best demonstrated by the fact that the Nigerian passport, at least in his view, is now synonymous with international criminal networks, with illicit activity. He says that Nigerians essentially get the leaders that they deserve, saying that much of the problem is that they don't demand more of their political leaders. Now, finally, I had to end, of course, with something a little bit more positive. I think the paper this day has a little bit more of constructive criticism, if you will, of the country's state of affairs, saying he does point out rightly so, I think, that there are few countries, if any, where nation building is essentially a finished and done process, that all nations are reckoning with, how to move forward, how to learn from the past. He says that Nigerian Independence Day should be used to celebrate and acknowledge the efforts of those that helped liberate it from what he describes from British rule. And he says there are some causes for celebration, including the fact that obviously there are more schools, hospitals, and infrastructure today than there were 60 years ago. He also adds that the Nigerian army and police forces are headed by Nigerians instead of British officials, which for him is a positive. But I think he does address what many see as one of Nigeria's major problems, which is the failure to kind of rework its federalist system and make it so the country's nearly 200 million citizens all feel a part of one united nation. It's true that be it in the north or the south or the middle, the east and the west, you almost get the impression that you're in several completely different countries. So for him, the real stakes in the future is to make it so that people from all across the country feel like they're a part of one nation.
Interesting to see how critical an eye they're able to take on their own country. Now, Aaron, you've also spotted a story about a scandal affecting the World Health Organization.
That's right. 50 women who worked for the in the Democratic Republic of the Congo during the Ebola crisis between 2018 and 2020 have accused international aid workers, primarily, I think at least 30 from the World Health Organization, of pressuring women to have sex with them, either in exchange for work contracts, or in exchange for terminating their contracts, depending, of course, on the response. This is based on an investigation by the independent organization, the New Humanitarian, and the Thomas Reuters Foundation. They suggest that these practices were not isolated, but are have been widespread for several years now in the Congo. They quote drivers who say that they were regularly forced to transport victims to hotels or even to their places of residence where the abuse occurred. Now, as the New York Times points out, the WHO has, of course, vowed to carry out an investigation, as well as the other investigations, the other associations cited. That said, the paper does point out that this is not the first time UN employees or even aid workers have been accused of sexual abuse. They cite the case of Bosnia in the 1990s, as well as the Central African Republic and Haiti more recently, which were also involved in sexual abuse scandals surrounding humanitarian workers.
And finally, Aaron, in the UK, Downing Street considering a pretty harsh new asylum policy.
That's right, Eve. It made the cover of The Guardian and The Times today. Now, Foreign Office officials are reportedly resisting against these proposed plans, which would be processing asylum claims in overseas detention centers similar to Australia. Now, according to the documents obtained by The Guardian, Downing Street has asked officials to consider either sending asylum seekers to Moldova, Morocco, or even in places as far away as Papua New Guinea. The Times also mentioned that part of the plan is also perhaps to process asylum claims on unused boats, essentially, so off dry land. Now, the paper, The Guardian, does point out that this is actually even harsher than Australia's policy, because while Australia's policy relocates migrants that are intercepted outside of Australian waters, this British plan, if it moves forward, would include people who actually have already arrived on the British territory and theoretically then are subject to the UK's jurisdiction according to the European Court of Human Rights and the UK's Human Rights Act.
Okay, Erin, not the most uplifting of stories, but certainly interesting one. Thanks a lot for that roundup from the international papers. Okay, well, that's where we're going to have to take a quick break, but we're back with all the latest updates in just a few minutes, so do stay with us.